This wasn't an interview, it was an execution, and the blade came down from the one media ally Meghan Markle thought she owned forever. The moment Gayle King quietly shut the door, the entire Sussex media machine began to rattle. Because this wasn't a tabloid turning hostile or a British commentator sharpening knives, this was the most trusted woman in American television allegedly saying enough. And when she walks away, it means something inside that carefully curated fairy tale has gone dangerously wrong. Behind the polished lighting, behind the soft focused smiles, behind the scripted pauses and camera angles, something snapped, and it snapped loudly enough to echo through CBS boardrooms, Hollywood green rooms, and royal corridors on both sides of the Atlantic. This story isn't about one canceled interview. It's about control, it's about credibility, and it's about what happens when a duchess finally pushes even her safest allies too far. For years, Gayle King wasn't just a journalist in Meghan Markle's orbit, she was the firewall, the buffer, the human shield against accusations of bias, exaggeration, or manipulation. When Gayle spoke, America listened. When Gayle nodded along, credibility followed. That's why her presence mattered more than any Netflix deal, any podcast contract, any glossy magazine cover. But according to sources close to the fallout, that relationship didn't fade quietly. It collapsed under the weight of demands, revisions, red lines, and an obsession with narrative control that allegedly turned a journalistic conversation into a fully scripted performance. What was supposed to be a friendly sit-down reportedly became a battlefield of approvals. Questions sent, then resent, then edited. Topics boxed off like crime scenes. Entire areas of Meghan's life, her father, the royal family, contradictions in past statements reportedly declared untouchable. This wasn't transparency. It was choreography. And Gayle King, a woman who has interviewed presidents, war survivors, and scandal-scorched celebrities, allegedly saw something she couldn't unsee. She wasn't being asked to interview Meghan Markle, she was being asked to validate a script. Sources say that's where the trust cracked. Because here's the quiet truth of elite media, access only works when honesty exists on both sides. And once a journalist suspects they're being used as a credibility prop while the story keeps changing behind closed doors, the relationship becomes radioactive. Insiders describe a pattern that went beyond one tense production meeting. Promises made privately, narratives adjusted publicly, assurances given to Gayle that later evaporated in other Sussex tell-alls. Each time, the ground shifted. Each time, the version changed. And each time, Gayle's reputation, her currency, was put at risk. She felt used, one media executive allegedly summarized, not misled once, used repeatedly. And in that world, that's unforgivable. But the damage didn't stop at the professional break, because when the interview finally aired, something else began unraveling, right there on camera. Viewers didn't see warmth. They didn't see partnership. They didn't see a united front against the world. What they saw and couldn't stop talking about was Prince Harry fading into the background like a stage prop in his own marriage. Every time he leaned forward to speak, the rhythm changed. Interruptions landed softly but decisively. Sentences ended early. Eye contact slipped away. Analysts who replayed the footage frame by frame described a subtle but relentless dynamic. Meghan driving, Meghan steering, Meghan finishing the story alone. One nonverbal communication expert called it conversational dominance. Critics called it colder. Online audiences called it worse. Social media didn't erupt with sympathy. It erupted with discomfort. She looks bored by him. That sentence spread faster than any Sussex press release. For a couple whose brand depends on us against the world, the optics were brutal, because suddenly the narrative wasn't about love under siege, it was about imbalance, about control, about a prince who gave up everything now sitting quietly while his wife authored their story solo. And the more Meghan spoke, the more something unexpected happened. The energy drained. Viewers waited for revelation. They got repetition. The same themes, the same grievances, the same polished phrasing delivered with corporate precision instead of emotional heat. Critics didn't call it explosive, they didn't call it brave, they called it boring. And in the attention economy, boring is fatal. For 48 hours, that word followed the interview like a shadow. Commentators said the anecdotes felt recycled, the passion felt rehearsed, the confessional tone felt automated. People didn't lean in, they leaned back. This wasn't outrage fatigue. It was something worse, indifference. Put these two reactions side by side and a devastating picture emerges. On one side, Gayle King, the ultimate mainstream ally, allegedly cutting professional ties, her verdict quietly circulating among industry power players like a sealed indictment. On the other, the public watching the performance and deciding almost collectively that they'd seen this episode before and didn't need a rerun. This is what makes the moment dangerous for Meghan Markle. Her entire media strategy depends on controlled environments, sympathetic platforms, and carefully managed narratives. But that model collapses the instant elite journalists refuse to surrender editorial independence, and the instant audiences stop emotionally investing. If Gayle King, of all people, decides the cost isn't worth it anymore, the pool of willing high-profile interviewers doesn't shrink, it evaporates. And when the audience stops believing in the central relationship being sold, when Harry looks sidelined, diminished, almost invisible, the brand loses its emotional anchor. That's the real scandal unfolding here. Not a feud, not a cancellation, but a slow public realization that the pursuit of total control may have annihilated the very credibility it was meant to protect. Gayle didn't just walk away. The audience didn't just tune out. They delivered a verdict, one from the elite, one from the masses, and both say the same thing. The act is showing. The script is tired, and the world may finally be done listening. The most dangerous thing that happened after the camera stopped rolling wasn't said out loud, it spread quietly, person to person, executive to executive, producer to producer. Because in elite media circles, rejection doesn't come with press releases. It comes with silence. And suddenly, that silence started surrounding Meghan Markle. Gayle King's alleged decision to draw a hard line wasn't framed as drama, it was framed as final. No more interviews, no more favors, no more bending journalistic rules to accommodate special circumstances. According to insiders, there would be no gentle reset, no quiet reconciliation, no second take. The bridge wasn't cracked, it was burned. And that's when the real panic allegedly set in. Because Gayle King wasn't just another interviewer, she was the final seal of legitimacy in the American media ecosystem. Her presence neutralized criticism, her warmth softened narratives, her credibility insulated Meghan from accusations that every appearance was self-serving or tightly choreographed. Once she stepped away, the safety net vanished, and suddenly the old whispers sounded louder. Former aides, former collaborators, anonymous quotes from London that were once dismissed as jealousy or cruelty, stories about impossible demands, shifting versions of events, emotional whiplash, and an obsession with optics at the expense of substance. When those accusations came from faceless sources, they were easy to brush aside. When they were now allegedly echoed, even indirectly, by someone of Gayle King's stature, the dismissal stopped working. This is why this moment cuts deeper than any tabloid headline. Because credibility doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes. And once erosion starts at the top, gravity does the rest. Behind the scenes, executives began asking questions they hadn't dared voice before. Is the return worth the cost? Is the audience still emotionally invested? Is the narrative evolving, or is it looping? And those questions become lethal when the answer starts leaning the wrong way. At the same time, the footage itself continued to haunt the Sussex brand. Communication experts replayed it not for what was said, but for what was missing. The absence of mutual reinforcement, the lack of shared emotional rhythm, the visual imbalance between a wife commanding the spotlight and a husband shrinking inside it. This wasn't partnership, it was presentation. And audiences noticed. For years, Prince Harry's role in the story was sacrificial hero, the man who gave up everything for love. But now, viewers began asking a far more uncomfortable question. If he gave up everything, why does he look like he owns nothing in the room? The interruptions, the redirected sentences, the lack of visible affirmation, none of it was explosive. That's what made it so damaging. It was subtle enough to feel real and real enough to feel unsettling. This wasn't a villain edit. It was an unfiltered dynamic. And when that dynamic collided with Meghan's increasingly familiar talking points, the result wasn't outrage, it was boredom. Boredom is the silent killer of influence. It means the emotional return has diminished. It means the audience has learned the rhythm, predicted the beats, and stopped leaning forward. It means the story no longer feels urgent, just rehearsed. Critics said the delivery felt corporate. Cultural commentators said the grievances felt recycled. Social media said the quiet part out loud, we've heard this before. And once that thought takes hold, no amount of lighting or scripting can save the moment. This is where the twin verdicts converge. Gayle King's alleged professional rejection wasn't emotional, it was structural. It removed a pillar of access. The public's reaction wasn't cruel, it was apathetic. It removed removed momentum. Together, they form a pincer movement no PR team can spin their way out of, because Meghan Markle's entire media strategy relies on two fragile assumptions: that she can control the narrative and that people still care enough to watch. What happens when control alienates allies? What happens when repetition exhausts audiences? The answer is what we're watching unfold. The irony is brutal. In trying to manage every variable, every question, every angle, every transition, the story became smaller instead of bigger, narrower instead of deeper. And in squeezing out unpredictability, the performance lost authenticity. That's what Gayle King allegedly saw up close. That's what viewers sensed from their couches. And that's why this moment feels different. This isn't backlash driven by outrage, it's disengagement driven by fatigue. And fatigue doesn't trend loudly, it just moves on. The most telling detail is this: there has been no aggressive rebuttal, no fiery denial, no coordinated counteroffensive, just quiet damage control and carefully worded distance. Because when credibility fractures at this level, shouting only accelerates the collapse. Insiders say the realization is dawning that the old formula, sympathetic interviews, controlled environments, emotionally charged grievances, may have reached saturation. And without elite journalists willing to play along, the machine slows down fast. The public no longer sees a woman fighting the system. They see a system fighting to keep itself relevant. And Prince Harry, once the emotional heart of the story, now risks becoming its most uncomfortable symbol. A man present but peripheral, visible but voiceless, central but sidelined. That visual sticks because brands don't just sell narratives, they sell dynamics. And when the dynamic feels off, the illusion cracks. So this isn't the story of a canceled interview. It's the story of overreach. It's what happens when the pursuit of total narrative control collides with human perception, when even the most carefully staged moment reveals more than it conceals. Gayle King's alleged verdict wasn't shouted. The public's verdict wasn't organized. But together, they delivered the same message. The credibility buffer is gone. The emotional payoff is fading. And the world may finally be done decoding a story that no longer evolves. In trying to control the plot, Meghan Markle may have lost it. And this time, there's no friendly interviewer left to smooth the ending. To smooth the ending. To smooth the ending. To smooth...